It's understanding that allows people like us to tolerate a person like yourself. That is the general attitude of the Calarii elves of the Radleb Woods towards humans. They have never been trusted by the superstitious Trollodaran people, but they were also left alone for the same reason. Then came the Thaiatians, who also ignored the Calarii, but ignored almost everything else, allowing parts of the country that wasn't directly occupied to be threatened by humanoids and other raiders. Then came Grand Duke Stefan, who didn't ignore the elves, the humanoids, or the rest of the country. He so impressed the elves they signed a compact with him and provided him with the subject of this week's video, the Kiramikos Elvenguard. Welcome to Mystara. I'm Mr. Welch, and today we're taking an arrow for Grand Duke Stefan. The Elvenguard is a military unit sworn to Stefan Karameikos that all originate from the Calarii elves that make their home in the Radleb forest. The majority of them come from the town of Riflian, but a good number of them also come from elven settlements hidden inside the forest. In all, 122 elves serve in the Elvenguard. They're known for the standard elfy stuff. They can cast magic, are better archers and warriors, and they're also the premier cavalry unit in the Kiramikos military. They make up a third of the 2nd Division, who comprise the Duke's bodyguard. They're in charge of patrolling the Duke's Park and the Duke's Road to Kelvin, specifically the area near the Radleb Forest. They are also tasked with protecting the Duke in coordination with his regular bodyguard, and he will never be seen without at least 10 of them guarding him. To explain the origins of the Elvenguard, you must understand the history of the Calarii elves and their neighbors. As far as elven subraces go, the Calarii are of the Sylvan variety with no racial variations. If you're using the 5th edition guide, they follow the Wood Elf subrace. During the great exodus of the elves to Alfheim, the tribe that would become the Calarii decided to break from the other tribes and settle in a large wooded area along with another tribe, the Viala. They make up about 60% of the elves in Kiramikos today, while the Viala make up the remainder, aside from a very small amount of elves from other tribes. The Calarii made themselves at home in the forest and took to navigating the Windrush, Castellan, and Highreach rivers that flowed throughout the immediate area. The Viala over time migrated slightly east and settled in the border region between Trollodaran and Thaiatis. Calarii are regarded by other elves as hardworking. They aren't of the all-work-and-no-play mindset of their Minrathadian cousins, but they do branch out into industries you normally wouldn't find elves in. There's a lot of river boats operated by Calarii elves, from barges to cargo ships they use to bring their goods to market. They're known to be the trader of high-quality horses, and while the horses aren't as good as the famous Elven steeds, Calarii horses are still regarded for their stamina and speed. The majority of their time they spend hunting and logging, with some light agriculture for trade purposes. Almost all their goods are only sold at the town of Riflian, but the riverboats will occasionally sail down to Specularum. Calarii tend to have fair blonde hair with blue or violet eyes, standing between 5 and 5.5 feet tall. Standard elves again. They have the reputation of being mirthful, quick to laugh, or to break out in song while they work. They enjoy the company of others with a free spirit, while looking down upon people with dour dispositions. They work hard during the day and at night drink, dance, and tell stories in the company of their fellows. You would think that this would make them ideal neighbors, but the Trollodarans are quite insular and don't trust the elves regardless. They do get along well with the other demi-humans in the area. They're on good terms with the Viala elves, but rarely see their enigmatic cousins. They trade frequently with the gnomes of Highforge, but are mortal enemies with the goblins of the Dimrak Forest. The elves would have been happy living their lives and being ignored by the Trollodarans. The Trollodarans might be rude, but that was the extent of it. A Calarii elf walking into a tavern might quiet the place down, but nobody was going to throw him out or try to do him harm. If being left off Christmas card lists was the price of living next to the Trollodarans, the Calarii were happy enough with the status quo. But then the Thaiatians came and everything changed. Before 900 AC, the nation of Trollodara was a backwards nation that was generally ignored by its neighbors because of its untamed nature, the hordes of humanoids known to be living within, and the projected high cost of pacifying the region to make it civilized. The few human settlements were largely found in a single river valley or along the coast. Anyone trying to take the nation for its mineral wealth would have to fight through heavily forested terrain filled with an unknown number of hostiles. This changed with the coronation of Thaiatian Emperor Gabrionis IV in 898 AC. Gabrionis, for a variety of reasons, decided it was time to add his western neighbor to the empire. It was never a question of whether Thaiatis could conquer Trollodara, it was just a matter of how much it would cost. General Publius Sextus Trollodarius was tasked with the invasion, and he quickly crushed what little resistance was offered. The land had been without a king for almost a decade, as the powerful families that ruled the nation made it a point to eliminate any possible rivals to them for the throne. It had gotten so bad that even being considered for the throne of Trollodara quickly became known as a death sentence. The lack of a central authority was catastrophic when faced with the advancing legions. Marilenev was the only city to offer any real resistance, but even then it was hundreds of men against tens of thousands. The invasion of Trollodara took 9 months from start to finish. Most of this time involved Thaiatian ships sailing up and down the coast establishing outposts. Resistance was pointless, and the Trollodarans quickly began to realize this. Luln, Solescu, and Halag surrendered without a fight. The goblins of Dimrock proved to be a bigger threat than the conquered population of humans. The Thaiatians secured the High Reach River and the cities along it, as well as the coast, and then they stopped. The majority of the country is left unpatrolled because it had nothing Thaiatis wanted. The legions pushed the bandits and humanoids away from the occupied regions, into areas like the Radleb Forest and the Calarii settlements. The elves spent the next 70 years dealing with goblin and orc incursions into their region. The Thaiatians were no help. They only stopped in Riflian to collect taxes. Anything more than a few miles away from the river they couldn't be bothered with. Resistance against the Thaiatians was never an option. The Calarii didn't have the numbers to fight them. They were outnumbered by a single legion, and more troops could arrive in weeks if they wanted to start something. The Traladarans might have been rude neighbors, but the Thaiatians were apathetic landlords, uncaring if the Radleb woods were overrun with goblins. Then Stefan Karameikos arrived. Formerly the ruler of the Thaiatian province of Machatos, Grand Duke Stefan traded his family lands for the right to rule the nation of Traladara as an autonomous region of the Thaiatian Empire. He reversed the policy of apathy and started driving humanoids and bandits out of the regions they had long plagued. This earned him the respect of the Calarii elves, who saw a human leader that had their interests at heart. They made a compact with him shortly after he secured his place on the throne. If he would allow them the right to self-rule, they would provide troops to serve as his own personal bodyguard. Thus the Elvenguard was born. Their first role was the elimination of the humanoids that had been pushed into the Radleb Wood, destroying a tribe of kobolds that had claimed the western portion of the forest near Korazegi Keep. The Elven cavalry harassed the kobolds while the main army engaged them, and then chased down survivors of the rout to prevent them from reforming. After this, the Elvenguard was split into two groups, one protecting the city of Riflian and the surrounding areas, and one guarding the Duke's Park. They were used to supplement the troops already guarding the region, using their magic and skills to great effect. The Elvenguard have two garrisons, one in Kelvin and one in Specularum. Approximately half the force is split evenly between the two, with the rest of the unit tasked with either patrolling near the Radleb Wood or protecting the Grand Duke. Because of their limited number, they are rarely deployed as the primary force, acting more as rangers, scouts, and spies for the human troops that they are supplementing. Their typical enemies are humanoids, bandits, or monsters that have wandered too close to settlements. In non-military functions, they will help stranded travelers, look for obstacles in the rivers, deal with poachers, and investigate threats to the Grand Duke. Because of their low numbers, joining the Elvenguard is difficult. The candidate must obviously be a Calarii elf of good standing, and in game terms, at least a second-level elf for Bekmi, or in 5th edition, be a 4th-level fighter with the Eldritch Knight subclass. You have to wait for a position to become open, which can be a while because elves living centuries and all that. The normal opening is through the death of one of the Elvenguard, though a few have retired and opened up a position. This unit has only been in existence for 30 years after all. In elf terms, that's about a week. Once a position is open, the captain will handpick a new candidate, who will receive a short training period before becoming an official member. Once a full member, the recruit is issued a sword, dagger, and a suit of chainmail. This is standard gear, though most Elvenguard replace their equipment with magical equivalents, and are allowed to keep useful magic items captured in the line of duty. A member can resign at any time, but to rejoin they have to wait for an opening and permission from the captain. Any member can be dismissed by the captain or the Duke for misconduct, but this has never happened. The most common duty performed by the Elvenguard is patrol duty, but the most glamorous is serving as the Duke's bodyguard. This role is officially performed by the Ducal Guard, but there is always a small contingent of Elvenguard attached to the Duke as well. Their ability to cast spells to find threats to the Duke has saved his life on more than one occasion. They wear dress uniforms during guard duty. This is to draw the attention of people seeking to harm the Duke, and to distract enemies from the regular Ducal Guard, who are also in the crowd and largely aren't wearing uniforms at all. Because of the clandestine nature of the regular Ducal Guard, many people don't even know about their existence and assume the handful of elves guarding the Duke are the whole of his bodyguard, which is just how the Duke wants it. The one task of the Elvenguard that no one knows about outside of a very small circle is protecting the Ducal Mint and Threshold. The location of the Mint itself is secret. Most people think it is somewhere in Specularum, when instead it's run by Baron Halaran. The Elvenguard bring silver to the Mint in disguise as normal Calarii merchants, then return with the coins to Specularum by riverboat, typically using barges filled with hollowed-out logs. No one looks twice at a Calarii logging barge, and bandits aren't going to try to hold up a shipment of lumber. The actual knowledge of this operation is top secret. Even many of the Elvenguard don't know about this part of their duties. The Elvenguard aren't going to be a major part in most campaigns. They're not a large military force. When encountered, it will be in small squads guarding the roads and rivers of Kiramikos. If players do get to meet Grand Duke Stefan, they will notice the elves, but unless they're tasked with protecting the Duke or his family, the party will never actually get close enough to talk to one. But they are a great source of NPCs, an elite bodyguard that can serve as secret agents when you are running the party through Kiramikos. Next up, we're headed to Irendi to look at the Adventurers Club, or what happens when player characters unionize. Remember, next week is MystaraCon, so try to check that out virtually, as many of the people who were tied to the creation and maintenance of the setting will be talking about the very best D&D world, as voted on by the League of Nations.